Hey everybody, welcome back to Conversations in Pop Culture, and we are back in the saddle once again for another season. And I have with me for I think the third time, if I'm not mistaken here, comic creator Todd Kelley. So welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
I'm happy that you're back, and a lot of stuff's going on. And you have a Kickstarter. I think your first Kickstarter
It
actually.
is my first Kickstarter. I am beyond excited. It's been really cool. We kicked it off at the beginning of the month. I got tired of making excuses on why not to do a Kickstarter, and I finally ripped the Band-Aid off and just went for it. So it's been very cool.
Yeah, and I don't know if you're fully funded yet.
I am.
But
I am. We funded in 36 hours. It was very cool.
And so obviously it's a very interesting book. It's called Shelter the Defender.
Yep.
And so what is the basic premise of the comic for those who are hearing about it for the first time and know nothing about it and all that stuff?
All right, so Sheldor the Defender is an all ages comic book, which follows, and I like to say the bestest boy has bitten off more than he can chew. So Sheldor is an aging warrior dog who has been tasked with training his new apprentice, and what he's training her to do is to protect their persons. And so essentially, anybody who's got a dog at home, your dog protects your home, your dog protects you. So he's training his apprentice to protect dogs, protect the people in the home from the various threats that are out there. And the threats that they run into are, giant stuffed animals they got left in the backyard, or the UPS truck, which they call the big brown wagon, or, just maybe the dogs on the other side of the fence because they have no idea what's going on and they hear things. So, it's an all ages book. I came up with the idea. It actually came from, we had a loss, and the dog that Sheldor is based on had passed away, and I'd always wanted to do an all ages book. And so it kind of just seemed like, hey, look, this was a great way to kind of deal with what the emotions that I was going through, and then also, write something kind of all ages that I could read to my daughter. She turns 4 next month, and kind of wanted to do that. I was very lucky in the fact that I started working with Andrea, who's the head editor for Scout Comics, and he put me in touch with some great people, and we just started building a really, really cool book.
Yeah, so let's dive into this because
Sure.
obviously this is from the dog's perspective.
Yes.
And obviously everything is, a little outrageous where a stuffed animal is not really a threat, but they're interpreting it as a threat
Yeah.
and they're concerned and it's sort of like an enemy and they're a little bit confused. And so what is this like? Because it's very playful, but it's also very interesting because anybody who's had a dog is that sometimes they'll bark at something very weird. I have a dog and I'm a big Naruto fan. You're wearing a Naruto shirt, and my dog hates the Akatsuki symbol. It bothers her for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And so whenever I wear that shirt or she sees it just hanging out to dry, it freaks her out.
Yeah.
So what is this like? Because a stuffed animal can seem like a big threat to an animal, or it could just be that this is not supposed to be here. And so what
So
is that like? Because it's kind of funny.
yeah, and we wanted to have fun with it. And I'll admit, a lot of the one with the stuffed animal came from basically just going to Costco one time and seeing those huge, like giant, like teddy bears, right? And kind of like me and my wife joking around that, what do you do with that? Like after, like somebody gives it to you, or what if somebody you don't like gives it to you? Like, what do you do? And so we kind of came up with, like, we were joking around about, like, we toss it in the backyard or something like that. And then when I was writing this and coming up with kind of my antagonist for the first chapter, I just kept thinking about it. I was like, wow, how funny would it be, like, if it was just this giant teddy bear, from their perspective. And again, we call it the Great Gate Guardian because it's like propped up against the fence. And there's a little bit of backstory to it and everything. And it's just kind of, again, from the dog's like imagination and perspective. And that was kind of the thing too. It's just like, it's their imagination running wild. So it's their perspective and their imagination. And then, what are they seeing? What's going on? And then we try to sneak in some actual like lessons there too. But just try to kind of have fun with it. Like, what would the dog see? Like, how would it be, this big scary monster to a dog? But it's really just like a torn up stuffed animal that's been sitting outside for like 3 weeks.
Yeah, no, because it's very interesting and it's obviously very comical and it's from their perspective. And then you also have, the UPS driver and
Yeah.
you have other things in play. And obviously you mentioned the dogs on the other side of the fence and even dealing with that. And it's kind of just, from their perspective. And then you also have this whole thing where it's a mentorship thing as well.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Where you have this dog that is seasoned training a young whippersnapper who
Oh,
wants to get ahead of herself a little bit, and
yeah.
is not necessarily ready to go out there. And it's very interesting to see that as well, where she's a very rambunctious dog.
Yes, and so she's three of the dogs in the first story are all based on my dog. So Sheldor is based on my pup Sheldon. Pond is based on Pond. She's over here. So if I keep looking left, it's because she's trying to break into the room. And then Dozer as well. He's in here. So yeah, I mean, she's kind of that young puppy. And one of the things we try to take into it when we're teaching the kind of the lessons is also like Sheldor is kind of wrong. And like a lot of the things that he teaches, like he teaches his perspective and he teaches his experience, but his experience can be wrong. But at the same time, like he's just doing his best and trying to do it. So sometimes he's going to teach her right, sometimes he's going to lead her astray, and they're going to learn together. And it's kind of one of those things. So right now the Kickstarter is for book one, and then there's a caveat in there to get you over to book two. But the series right now is planned to be a 4-issue series. I would release each one individually and then kind of get it in a trade paperback. But each story or each comic is going to have 2 chapters in it. So it's going to be an 8-chapter series. And those first 2 chapters deal with, the Great Gate Guardian. And then chapter 2, they go to the arena, which is the dog park. And, it's basically from their perspective, it's like a gladiator's arena. And like they've got to do this and got to do that and whatever. But yeah, man, it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, so let's even go into this too, because one of the things about comics that's really tricky right now, and this is, I guess, a little bit more of my expertise, is that comics have left being a kid's activity and a kid's hobby massively. Me and Chuck Dixon spoke about this, and a bunch of other people who have been around forever have spoken about this as well, where the biggest loss for comics was not having it at the takeout aisle in the supermarket. Because a generation has been lost because of that, as well as price point. Because when you're going to the comic store and it's $5 for a book, it's a little bit pricey. It's not something that, mommy and daddy go, yeah, let's give this so Joey shuts up in the car. And that's the problem. Not to be mean about it, but if you can get your kids to be quiet for 10 minutes and you're a new parent, it's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Quality time, bro. But it's so funny though, because you're spot on. Like you're 100% spot on. But on the other side of that, like you look at a comic book, right? So a comic book is anywhere from 21, 24 pages, entertainment, right? Like it's enjoyable. $5, and it almost seems like a lot, but at the same time, like you can go buy a greeting card right now, and that's like $5, and that's going to get thrown away. You know what I mean? And it's just nuts where kind of comics are on a certain level kind of undervalued, in my opinion. But I mean, you're spot on in terms of.
Let's actually talk about that too, because it's complicated. Because this is again my area. I make not a living, but I make a decent side hustle off of buying and selling books as a commodity. And so this is part of the problem, is that things have become very much commoditized in our society. And then, when now it's a little bit tricky, especially on small press levels, because it's not $5 on small press. It's more like 10, 15. And it's a very complicated thing, I think, for a parent to say, cool, this has as much merit as a picture book that I want to read that has the same price point. I think this is the problem, is that it's a cultural problem. And then it's also a price point. And I think it's a big issue. And I think that just the culture war on that has been lost. And not the political culture war, but the culture war on saying comics have just as much merit as a novel does in certain ways, where they're just telling a story using different tactics and using different tools in a toolbox. And I think that's what happened when they came out of the supermarket, when they came out of Barnes and Noble, when they came out of areas that are not comic shops. Right. And that's the problem, is that you specified where you can buy a comic book. And now it's not a household item. When a comic is in Target, Target is a household, everything store. So if a comic's there, then it's an everything item. When it's in a comic shop, it's a comic. I think that's right.
Well, and so even when you think about that, like talking about the all ages comic in general, like if you go into a comic book store and you look for the all ages comics, they're typically like hidden off to the side. Like there's very rarely are they all up front, unless it's just a store that, does that on purpose. But a lot of times they typically tend to kind of be off to the side or in the back or, something along those lines. But and the volume of them is not as high either. So it's just kind of one of those things where, like you talked about, you kind of lose them at the kid level. Um, you don't get into the comics until a little bit later at that point. But, I'll say specifically with this one, when I had the intent of making it, it was really, a couple different reasons. The first one, obviously, was again, I was kind of dealing with my grief, and this was a creative way to do it. The second being that I love my daughter so much. She wants to read about 3 or 4 books every night before we go to sleep, and she always picks the same freaking books. And I wanted to write something that if you were a parent and you had to read this book over and over and over again, that you would get joy out of reading this book, that you would find something different every time, and that you would get a kick out of it. And this wouldn't be the book you're like, oh crap, I don't want to read that.
So let's actually talk about that too, because
Sure.
this is also an issue where, I mean, kids' comics are definitely not being fulfilled. I mean,
Yeah,
we look at comics, the horror comics, there are more horror comics than we need.
sure.
Not saying that they're not good or bad, but
No.
that niche has been filled. Superheroes has clearly been filled. You know, ultimate, dynasty books essentially
Mhm.
and conquest books have been filled heavily. And so what is that like too? Because in certain ways it is a very open path. It
Yeah.
also, if your parents are into comics, they want to bestow that onto their children. Whether their kids take to it or not later on in life is not the point, I think, with this book, because I don't think a 4-year-old's going, I want this book, and is going to the comic shop.
Right.
It's the parent that's going to the comic shop saying, I
Right.
want to introduce my kid to it.
Yeah.
And I want them to read a comic, but I want them to read something that's appropriate. I
Yeah.
don't want, I guess something, for lack of a better word, sexualized
Mhm. Yeah.
reading to my 4-year-old.
Right. Right.
And so what is that like? Because to me, at the same way that it's not, I guess the mainstream, it's also very much a blue ocean in
So
certain ways.
man, I feel like there's so much opportunity with it. And I mean, just going back, so we do Comic Cons. We do Comic Cons all the time. We talked about the fact this is my first Kickstarter. And when I did this Kickstarter, everybody was like, "Oh, all ages books are really hard to fund on Kickstarter." And I was just like, "Okay, cool. Like, I understand that. I agree." So for me, when I went specifically with this book, it was I wanted to write an all ages book, and your target audience are young readers, and then the parents who are going to be reading to the young readers. But on the other side of that, my target audience is dog owners. All right, so I want to get people who, again, they love their dog, and it is what it is. Like again, I've I think Dozer is 12, going on 13. I adopted him when he was 4 months old. And like I can sit here and tell you, I can tell you what my dog's voice is. I can joke around with you about like how I feel like he would say things or his personality. And so when I started creating this book and putting those personalities to the dogs, and I used mine, and then when I needed to create other characters, I started reaching out to friends and was like, "Hey, do you mind if I put your dog into this book? Like, how would you do this? How would you do that?" And all of a sudden, it became so much fun. And then on the other side of it, I also noticed with the friends that I worked in, some of them, their dogs had passed as well. And it was a way for them to kind of work through their grief and share that love as well. And it kind of just became this cool thing. So for me, when again, building this book, it's like, okay, cool. If it ever gets picked up by a publisher, fantastic, cool, no big deal. If it doesn't, again, we'll do it through the Kickstarter. We'll do Comic Cons, and there's an opportunity there as well, because I can't tell you how many times we've had people at our table, with their kids with them, and we have a book and they'll buy the book for us, but we didn't have anything for their kid. And for me, I was like, okay, cool, we can fill that spot now where we're going to have something for their kids, and they're going to be able to read it to their kids, and it seemed like a no-brainer to me. It worked out really well, and again, with what we're able to do. And we worked in a spot for the Kickstarter as well for anybody who wanted to put their dog in issue 3. I pre-wrote the script for, I'm sorry, issue 2. I pre-wrote the script for issue 2, chapters 3 and chapters 4. And I have 12 spots where I needed other dogs. And I wanted to create these characters. And I was just like, you know what, if I do this and I give somebody an opportunity to, select a tier on Kickstarter and put their dog in the book, Let me see if people would be interested in doing that. And we ran out of spots in 5 days. And after all the spots were up, I had like 15 more people reach out and say, "Hey, look, can I still get in?" And it's just like, unfortunately, no, because like it would just be convoluted at that point. But when I do my next Kickstarter, when I write my scripts moving forward, I'm pretty much always going to write. I don't think I'll always be able to do 12 spots. This just worked out with the story. But I'm going to at least create about 6 to 8 spots, pretty much every chapter, where people can, if they want to have their dog put in, they can have their dog put in too. That way, again, they can kind of see that. There was something empowering about it for me, and I want to share that with others.
No, it's interesting because it's just such an interesting topic, kids comics.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, I think things have changed in that segment, but I also think it is a long, complicated road where I think that there is a lot of things that are difficult about it because in a lot of ways, I mean, the hobby is definitely more adult driven. And I think that also what's happening though is that I think it's changing because the people who are now adults. So I'm 30. So obviously I'm probably gonna be a parent in the next 5 years.
37. So yeah.
So obviously I'm gonna be introducing my kids to comics, whether they take to it or not. I'm gonna be introducing them to baseball cards and a variety of other stuff. But I think that's also something that has changed too. And the reason why I know this is that Avatar: The Last Airbender during COVID proved that philosophy.
Love that show.
Where it was the #1 show on Netflix because all the people who watched it as a kid wanted to show their children that show.
Fun fact, I was one of those parents, and my daughter, and I think she was maybe 18 months and barely would like sit and watch TV, but I would put it on and I mean, she would just sit there with me and she would chill and she would watch it.
And so it's just very interesting where I think that's also what's changing slightly, but it's still a long road out. But even to go further into this, I mean, obviously, let's talk about running a Kickstarter because I ran a Kickstarter and that thing was ugly for me.
I backed it.
Yeah, I know. It was rough. I learned a lot of things. I also learned a lot of things that I did not want to know about people.
That's fair.
It's funny who's in a foxhole and who's not with you. You figure that out really quickly in life. The topic of money is the ultimate determination of character. I hate to say that, but it absolutely is. And to me, money is just energy. So at the end of the day, that's what it really comes down to. But what is this like for you? Because you've done 2 books before this, I think.
Yep.
And then now you're on Kickstarter, and Kickstarter is a scary place. Crowdfunding in general is terrifying because you don't know how it's going to work when you throw an idea out there. And are people going to back it? Are you going to get judged? And there's a lot of, things where it's like, cool, I'm putting this thing out there. Are people actually going to be receptive to it? And so what was this like? Because it is terrifying.
So for me, I have a couple different perspectives. So first off, I'll say I got a lot of help. So Kevin, Matt, and Martin, appreciate you guys. All kind of gave me some great feedback. And, I've been toying around with doing a Kickstarter for a little while. And I kind of, like I said earlier, I kept coming up with excuses not to do it. And so I finally was just like, all right, this is the thing I'm going to do it on. I'm going to rip the Band-Aid off and I'm going to try and I'm going to stop. And the thing was, I kept trying to be perfect at it. Like I kept trying to just like make it perfect. And funny enough, I finally was just like, screw it. I'm just going to build it. And I built it with what I had. And the funny part is, like, if you go and you look at it, like the cover that I use doesn't even have the logo on it because at the time I didn't have a cover that had dressed up with the logo. So the cover is the Virgin cover. It's just, doesn't even have the logo on it. If you look at the logo that I put up there, there's literally a spot where it says letterer because we hadn't put the letterer's name in there yet. And those were the docs that I ended up using to build it. And, nobody really cared. They took a look at it. The one thing, Nathan, I can't pronounce his last name, but I'll find it. He did an amazing video, the trailer that I sent you. And that thing was really cool. And I shared that around and I had a lot of fun. But I just prepped it best I can. I kept it really simple. I only used, I think 4, maybe 5 tiers. And, like you said, I did 2 other books, so I easily could have like really overcomplicated those tiers, but I tried to just keep it really simple. I did a
Oh
digital
man,
tier.
so much to talk about. There's so much to talk about. So this is one of my biggest pet peeves on Kickstarter
Okay.
is when somebody has a 50 to 60 tiers.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. 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 So,
I'm looking at one person, and we all know who he is, and he's a friend of mine, Jim Noble. Jim Noble has broken and has made the determination that you can only have 100 tiers on Kickstarter. But even Isaac Fox has a lot of tiers, and there gets to a point where I'm like, I do not want to spend an hour going through your campaign to figure out what book I want to buy.
yeah.
I understand and I appreciate you giving me choices, everybody. It's not a bad criticism, but there's a concept where there's something called too many choices.
Yeah.
And, if you have 20 variants, that's too many. That's too many. If you have 12, it's too many, to be very honest. If you
Yeah.
have 8, 8 is a good number, 10 is a good number. 12 is pushing it. But beyond that, I mean, it gets a little ridiculous. And I understand that if you're making a lot of money and maybe you're doing $100,000 because you have that much, I understand the money. And I'm not going to, argue that point. But you also have to understand me as a customer. I'm not interested in spending 30 minutes trying to figure out what I want.
No, I'm with you. And I would also say, I'm not going to argue with effective. So if it works for you, it works for you. But for me, doing my first Kickstarter, I knew that fulfillment was, going to be a pain. To give you an idea, I don't even sell my books online right now because everybody expects like Amazon turnaround. And again, I got a 4-year-old, I got a full-time job. I do this on the side. So you order my books on Monday and I don't get to ship them till the following Monday. People are usually upset about that. So I don't even sell them online. So I treated Kickstarter as like basically an online pop-up store. This is what I was going to do. And I was going to go fulfill this. So again, I kept it at 5 tiers. I made it very simple. I did add a tier after I launched it because again, Matt Knowles reached out. I was like, hey man, you need to have a digital option for somebody who just wants digital comics. I was like, that's a great idea. I meant to add it in and I just didn't. And I went through, I added it and it was good to go. But again, just kept it simple. So we did a digital tier. We have a tier where you just get the book and the digital tier. So you have the physical tier and those are your bottom 2. And then our third one, you can get, I call it the ones because I'm obviously a WWE fan and I just wanted to call something the ones. So you get issue 1 of Project Titans and you get issue 1 of Sheldor and you get both the digital copies as well. And then we have, I partnered up with Grey Ghost Comics in Tifton, Georgia. And Scott Beasley's doing a variant cover for me. And so I did a Grey Ghost bundle where you can get yourself a Grey Ghost Comics hat, the Grey Ghost, the Grey Ghost exclusive comic, and you can get, Sheldor as well. And then I did the part of the pack tier, which is where you could get your dog in the following issue. And I knew coming into it that, to hit my goal, I needed to sell all 12 of those spots for, be part of the pack. And that was going to get me, 3/4 of the way to my goal. And it did. And, that was kind of, again, I knew that was going to be what I needed to focus on. I knew that was going to be my big seller. So I just put a lot of attention there. And then now I'm kind of working on the Grey Ghosts and the digital tiers and trying to get my backers up and then trying to, sell as many of this exclusive covers as I can.
Yeah, so what is that like? Because there's a whole concept where obviously I knew when I ran mine what number I needed. I knew how much of what I needed. And, it's very important. And obviously I run my eBay store and I know the exact margins. And so this is the problem with my whole Kickstarter is that I was thinking of it like my eBay store and I was thinking it more of a traditional B&B versus a Kickstarter. And obviously, if I come back to Kickstarter with a project, which may happen in August or September of this year, I'm going to think of it very differently. And I'm going to have a blast doing it. It's going to be crazy. And I'm going to get so much hate. And I'm going to have to channel my inner Seth Rollins. Curb stomps are allowed.
The big red boots. Yeah.
Very much. And cinder blocks will be included. But anyhow, don't worry. Beth Phoenix will be fine, guys. Don't worry. Anyhow, the point is that what is this like to actually understand what you need? Because I think this is the biggest problem with Kickstarter is that this is a business.
Yeah.
Kickstarter is a business, understanding it and understanding A, B, C, and D equals E. And I
Mhm.
think this is why people don't know how to make money on Kickstarter, take a distribution out, and understand what they're doing. This is what I do in my eBay business is take out distributions. And this
Mhm.
is what I'm very, very good at. And it's one of my biggest pet peeves is that you should understand before you launch your
Mhm.
campaign what numbers you need for everything. And
Yeah.
you should have a pretty good idea what you're going to have to do to get those numbers
Right.
and what, exactly how you're going to do it. Or say, I need all 12 of these spots filled. I need
Yeah.
10 digitals. I need 30 of this, or I need a combination of
Mhm.
10 of A, 20 of B, and 5 of C, and that'll get me where I need to get.
So I definitely broke down a few different scenarios on how I needed to do it and kind of had a different game plan for each week. So this week I was, week one I was going to focus on this. Week two I was going to focus on this. Week three I was going to focus here. And I did a bit of a longer one. I initially was going to do a short one. I initially was only going to do it for about 14 days. And Kevin Joseph, the writer for Tart from Scout Comics, I was at a show with him and he was like, "Hey," he's like, "I understand where you're coming from." He's like, "I get it." And for me, I was really just trying to do it short. That way, it wasn't something that kind of drug out. And it was my intent was to be brief, be brilliant, be gone. Like that. That was it. Like I was just gonna get in, get out, and be good. And he was just like, man, he's like, no, like you're trying to grow this business and grow this audience. So even if the last 15 days you only focus on getting like the digital backers, that way, just it's just new people reading your story. Like, why not do that? Like, why wouldn't you, spend that extra time and get as many backers as you can? And I was just like, you're right, you're right. So I extended it. I probably extended it a little too long because I ran it basically for almost a whole month. Which I think next time I do a little shorter. But again, it's been fun and it's going to create opportunities where I get to come on, different podcasts and talk and do different opportunities. My game plan this year, honestly, I'm probably going to do 3, maybe 4 Kickstarters. We're reworking all the artwork for the Project Titan series, and we're going to relaunch it, like new logos, new everything. It's going to be called the Project Titans. I know, big change. But it's going to be, we're going to redo it. We've upgraded all of our art. We're upgrading our covers. And we're going to relaunch it instead of, I think right now we're at 7 issues and 8 and 9 are in the works. But we're going to redo it as 3 trade paperbacks. And so this year I'm going to do
Let's
2.
actually I want to talk about that too in a
Sure.
second, but I actually think it's a mistake to do a 14-day campaign on Kickstarter. And I think you outlined something where if you have 30 days,
Mhm.
you could break it up into almost 4 phases.
Yeah. And that's what I did.
And I think this is the issue where, great, let's say everybody knows that the first week and the last week are
Mhm.
really, really important. That's when a lot of things happen. And that's
Yeah.
where a lot of backer movement occurs. But I
Right.
think that in those 2 weeks that nothing's going on, that's the time that you should be growing your audience and utilizing it. And I think that's the time you do a lot of podcasts.
Yep.
And also, I think a lot of people have to understand that you should be doing podcasts before you launch.
Yep.
I mean, obviously, there's a lot of things. I really like when a project is in its first week and they come on my shoulder during their last week.
Mhm.
Personally, I like when a project's live because it's the most beneficial to me,
Yeah.
but I can help it the most. But even still, I think that in those 2 week span, you could have a lot of fun. You could throw some weird stuff out there. I also think what people fail to understand is that maybe you even want to create, and I might do this with mine, is I might go and I might have 3 tiers.
Mhm.
And then in week 2, I might add a tier. And then in week 3, I might add another tier. And
Mhm.
now all of a sudden I might change a bunch of images. And I don't know how much you can customize on Kickstarter, but all of a
Mhm.
sudden you start adding some weird stuff in there. And
Mhm.
people are like, cool, this just updated. Let me go back to it. So I
Yeah.
back it on day 1. What else is there in week 2? And you let everybody know, saying, look,
Mhm.
some weird stuff's going to happen. This is now an event. And I
Right.
think this is what people don't understand because other people realize the Kickstarter is not, it's a choice. It is not a requirement at this point in comics.
Yeah.
And it's a privilege and it's a very high end privilege. And so I think that's where people mess up too. And I hear people say, well, I'm running a 2 week campaign. I think that's a mistake. I think they're leaving a boatload of money on the table. And maybe I think differently because of what I've been through and everything that I do, but I want to give a reason for somebody to actually come back to my page every single day, because what is going to happen next? And maybe it's because I'm a wrestling fan. It's organized chaos, right?
Right.
When I mean, you're old enough to remember when Raw was crazy, right?
Yeah.
Every week you didn't know what was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And if you missed it, you missed what happened, and you read about it or heard about it the next day. You're like, that actually happened.
Right. Well, it was back before you could YouTube it and see what was going on. But yeah, I mean, you're spot on, and I agree, and I think I won't do a 14-day one like I discussed. I think moving forward, I think the shortest I would probably do is 21 days, but you'd probably be looking 21, 24, somewhere around there, where you can, break it down into 3 or 4 different kind of almost like small marketing campaigns, and it's very interesting because, like you said, you mentioned kind of who you were surprised on, kind of who backed and who didn't back and who shared and who didn't share. And, I was very lucky in the fact the majority of the people that I expected to backed. I didn't really have any challenges where people didn't show up. I was, again, very lucky in that regard.
Oh, how fortunate for you. I learned who hates me in comics. And it's funny because they don't have any good argument, but that's not the point. The point is that I found out who hates me in comics. I found out a lot more people hate me than I realized. And I've also come to the conclusion that they made a fatal mistake. They didn't kill me. That's the problem. Is that if you're going to hate somebody, you're going to challenge somebody, make sure they don't get back up, is all I'm going to say. But I'm very happy that you didn't have that experience, because you must be very fortunate not to have that experience like I did. It was horrible.
Well, again, I feel very blessed in it. I mean, we funded in 36 hours, and I didn't expect that. Like, I was at my daughter's dance class and hit refresh, and like we were funded, and it was cool. It was a good experience. And it took a lot of the pressure off. Now, that being said, it was my first one, so there's a lot more people that were wanting to jump on and help out. When I go to do my next one, a lot of those same people aren't gonna, kick in the exact same way they did, because they went big this time. That's cool and that's great. And I don't expect it. What I'll say about this one with the campaign, and this isn't a shot at anybody, it's just how life is. But my hope when we initially did it was I was going to focus on doing the become part of the pack for week 1. And then I really wanted to focus on the Grey Ghost variant in week 2, but the cover's not finished. And that's no shot. It's whatever. The Scott who's making it is, he runs 2 businesses, has a family. And I probably, it's one of those situations where I probably should have waited. I probably should have waited until the variant was done before I launched it, but it's not finished yet. So instead of backing, pushing that one as much as I was in week 2, I kind of slowed it down a little bit. And whenever it's ready, we'll do a big reveal and we'll have fun with it, and we'll do some stuff at the store. And then the last, few days of the campaign, I'm just going to focus on the digital piece, and I'm going to try to grow as many backers as we can and go from there.
So let's even talk about this with Kickstarter, though, because Kickstarter has been weird collectively, where what wound up happening in January is that there was less backers, and not less backers, less projects on. And then it all came in which that I think it was less than 200 in comics, but also it then got back up above 200. And I think what it was is that I think people were burned out from the holidays. I think people were also saying, what is this economy going to look like? Because when people have money that is tight, or people are recovering from the holidays, or they're just trying to, breathe, people might say, look, I want to wait a little bit to see what's going on and what the market looks like. I also think, and I was speaking to somebody not in comics, but more in wrestling, and what they said to me and what she said to me was that in the last 3 years, people have spent a lot of time with themselves, and they've come to learn who they are very efficiently. They've come to figure out what they like, what they don't like. I am no different. I think a lot of people, when you have spent, and if you were single and you were spending, weeks, if not months by yourself, not really socializing directly with people or going out, or not having the extreme pressures of work, you find out what you like and what you don't like. And I think also what's happened in comics is that a lot of people said, I want to do this as a hobby, have now realized that they've accomplished their first, second, or third issue and they're done. And there's people who want to do this as a career or a profession, or they're treating it like a business. And so, what is that like for you? Because this is not a hobby for you, it's definitely more of a business.
It is more of a business. I've learned a lot, and I'm constantly learning. I've learned a lot on this Kickstarter. I've learned a lot in the last month, and it's just something that I'll tell you. If you go into it and you're trying to do it and you're trying to do it professionally, I would set realistic expectations. Don't get caught up in what you think you have to do or what so and so says you have to do. You got to set realistic expectations based on what you're able to accomplish. What are your opportunities? What do you need? So for me, I'm a writer, right? So I got to pay everything art wise. Like I'm always paying for that. The thing I'm good at though is selling. So in terms of going to a convention, I know for a fact that like once I have the product with me, like I'm going to be able to sell it. And again, from a business perspective, I know my margins. I know what I can afford to sell things at. I know what I can give them away at. I know, if I've got a couple extra copies of something laying around, I know, again, I know how to sell. I know how to do these things. Where I am growing is as a writer and as someone who builds and puts these comic books together. And I'm growing in, even just my connections in terms of, just good, strong people and build things together. If you go take my first book that I made, Project Titans issue 1, before we even updated the lettering, and then you compare it to what Sheldor was going to look like it's an absolute night and day difference. And the difference is just that I know a lot more people that are a higher level. I know what to ask. I know who to talk to. I know how to phrase things that, maybe I didn't before. And again, from a production level, like that's the piece that I'm constantly learning. And getting there, my goal now is that when I want to put that product out, I want to be able to take it and put it next to a comic book at the comic book store, and you choose my comic. Like that's how good I want it to be. Whereas before, I was just happy to get it made. And there was a difference between happy to get it made, which don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with that. When you're building your first book, it's okay to be happy to just get it made, because that was a long effing journey and you should be proud of yourself. But you are eventually going to realize, like, okay, cool, there's areas that I could have done better at. And that's the same with my first Kickstarter. There are areas that I could have done this a lot better. But at a certain level, I'm just happy to have had it made. Made is better than perfect. And, the next one I'm going to learn from what I did here. And my next one will be built better. Who knows if I actually do more money, but it'll look more aesthetically pleasing.
So let's actually talk about this, because I hear the term leveling up. And Travis Gibb has a show, Leveling Up, or Leveled Up.
Yeah, I've seen it.
I like Travis. I think it's a fine show. But my whole thing is that in the last 2 years in my eBay business and in the last 6 months, I haven't leveled up. I've evolved. Mm. And I think that there's a difference where evolving and adapting. So for those who don't know, and I haven't very much been talking about this, is that I am going through diversification in my eBay business for comics. So I'm actually bringing in a lot of other merch and a lot more interesting merch. And there's things that I can't talk about at the moment that is going to be a game changer for what I'm trying to do. And depending on what happens in a week from now, it might actually get doubled up. But it's not the issue that's going on. It's a whole different thing. It's a monetary thing, depending on how my next Wednesday goes. But the point is that I think, what is that like? Because I think that that's a real thing where, and in my eBay business, I've evolved just because I've been through this enough. And it's not that I know more people. It's just that I have more wisdom. I can spot trends. I can actually see talent. And I'm fortunate enough that I interview a lot of people. And I can figure out and determine who's a winner and who's not. I can figure out what somebody's trying to do. I can also figure out what it's going to look like. I'll give an example. Merc Magazine and Zenescope. Merc Mag is an early 2004, 2005 Zenescope right now. What that means, in my opinion, is that in 10 years from now, Merc's magazines that they put out are not going to be as valuable as their books that they put out originally. It's the same thing with the Zenescope book. Those books are worth a lot of money. Same thing with a company like Big Dog Inc. When Big Dog Inc. first started out. And so as an investor, I'm very in tune to that. So what is this like for you? Because obviously you mentioned something super interesting, just because you know more people and you know people have been around longer and who to ask. I think that's so crucial at
Mhm.
this point.
Well, so and I'll give you this. Again, going into it, right? So my first show, all right. So I did my first book before I even went and did my first show. I do my first show, and one of the artists that was across from me, Marvin McDonald, who does the 8 Ball series and also does our show with us. One of the first pieces of advice he gave me was just like, "Hey, who did your lettering?" And it was the original artist, and he offered to do the lettering for free. So in my head, I'm just like, "Why would I turn this down? He's going to do the lettering for free. It's fantastic." Then he showed me, and he's like, "Hey, look, like here, the lettering could be better." And we started digging into it. He talked to me about the importance of lettering, and then all of a sudden, I knew something that I didn't know before because, again, to me, I didn't understand it. I was focused on the story. I was focused on the twist. I was focused on, building the book, and I didn't understand that. And then I knew that. And every show that I went to, somebody helped me, and I learned something, and I made a new connection. And I met them, and I met that. And again, going into this book, we talk about a level up, we talk about evolving. Again, I'm working with Andrea, who's the head editor for Scout Comics, and he's literally treating this like I'm trying to build a book for Scout Comics, and he's holding it to that standard. Every time I bring something, he's like, "No, do this, work with this person, what's going on." And then again, all of a sudden, you're hanging around these people, and you soak in this information. Again, I got to go do a show, and I'm working with Kevin Joseph, who's been doing the Tart comic, and it's just like, holy crap, you get to go work with Matt Knowles, who's in Symmetry and doing the Misfits Clubhouse, also a scout, but he's also the guy who goes to the comic conventions, and he gets to host the panels with all the different celebrities and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, again, you kind of start working with them, and you can't help but like soak in all this knowledge, learn this. And then for me, I get to kind of teach them some of the things that I'm good at as well, and talk to them about kind of the selling side of it, and different ways to merchandise your table, and different ways to get out there and sell to people when you're at a show, that maybe again they weren't aware of. So it's you get out there and you share, you absorb. And for me, I've joked around on a couple of podcasts that I've done that, like, I truthfully, if somebody buys my comic book and they come back to me like 2 days later and they like try to give me a critique of my comic book, somebody who just bought it off the street, like I don't like it. Like it's I can't tell you how many times at cons, like, you'll get artists or letterers or stuff like that that'll buy your book, they'll come back, they'll critique your book and try to get you to like hire them on. Unfortunately, it's happened a couple times, and like it just irritates me. So that's not going to happen. At a con, I'm not in a perspective of being really the most open-minded towards growth perspective at that point. From again, somebody on the other side of the table. Now, if I know they're a writer or a developer or something like that, then heck yeah, let's talk. That's cool. Now, outside of it, once we're outside of the con, yeah, cool. I'll take any feedback in the world. It's all good. But when I'm there Friday through Sunday, I'm just focused on selling and making connections and meeting people.
Yeah, no, I'm the exact opposite. I'm so just I don't I have no desire to do cons.
Yeah.
Honestly, if I do a book, legitly, I'm probably not going to do a con. I actually think it'll make my book better. I think it'll make it more exclusive, and I think it fits into exactly my personality. And there's a method to my madness.
But that's perfect, and that's for you. And then that's again, you got to play to your strengths and your opportunities.
I can do a con. I think making it as limited and having one or two accessibility access points on it makes it just so that whenever I throw it up on a website and I have a 48-hour sale on it, that's it. And that's the point, is that I want to drive traffic in short bursts so that when it becomes an event to buy it. And that to me is a different strategy completely. It's Kickstarter, and then I want to keep that exclusivity.
Well, so what I was going to say, I mean, that's kind of the I guess approach with Kickstarter at this point. It's just me using it as like an online pop-up store. Like that's really all it is. Like it's I'm going to build this book no matter what. I'm I already know how I'm going to make the money on this book. I got that planned out already. But Kickstarter is going to be that online pop-up store for somebody who doesn't happen to visit a con in the Southeast when I'm out there doing it. But I completely agree. I think you creating those events, putting those windows of time on it, and again, like you said, creating that exclusivity. I think there's a big pop to it. And then again, as you build your audience and you build your reputation and putting out quality products, people continue to follow and, purchase whatever you want. It was, I think it was Hoyt Silva that told me, we were at Fallout Comics one time and he was talking to me about, he's like, man, he's like, you got to do as much as you can because when one thing pops, they're going to go get everything. He's like, you just need that one thing to pop and then everything that you have will pop.
It's also the idea, and I think a lot of people don't understand this, and people hate me when I say this. Producing a comic is like an exotic dancer / stripper, where they have a very short window. I'm being very honest when I say this. Where
it's unique analogy.
What did you say?
It's a unique analogy.
No. Hear me out on this though. There's always a new crop of kids popping up. Yeah. And the average life of a comic person is not long. It's very similar to certain players in the NFL. Yep. So if you can produce a lot of money and you have a book that's a runaway book that produces you $500,000, you have to run with that and you have to really hustle. And the earlier you start hustling, the bigger you build your legacy. And I'll give you a good example of this. Scott Snyder. Scott Snyder built a legacy that he's now going to be around forever. And it's the same thing. And people think that analogy is wrong. That analogy is 100% correct because you need to build your legacy and you need to build and give a reason why you should be a mainstay there. Because let's be realistic, there's a new crop of writers who are wanting to dethrone people in the business constantly, and they're coming in and out of Hollywood. And in comics, if you're a writer, you're competing against everything. You're competing against novelists. You're competing against screenwriters. You're competing against people who failed at screenwriting who come to comics. I mean, you know how many people I know who said, I wanted to be a screenwriter, and then now they're writing comic books. And then you have people who, I forget who wrote I think he wrote Batman War Games. And then now he's not in comics anymore. And so that's the point, is that it's a very short window. And I think that's the whole thing where, you need to be constantly hustling and pushing it out. Because if you don't, you're not going to be creating your legacy and somebody's going to take your spot.
Well, it's interesting too, because you mentioned earlier, you're like, money's energy. And, I think energy is a big piece of that, right? And I think you have to be very tactful about how you use, your energy, in your time, right? So, for me, example, and again, I work full time. I have a 4-year-old daughter. I have a wife. We travel. We do our stuff. I spend 3 nights a week working on comic stuff, and whether that's writing, whether that's editing, whether that's doing the social media side of it. And I do think that's an area where a lot of people struggle, and you're starting to see more people try to transition and improve. And look, we started I reached out to you whenever I was starting to try to put a podcast together, and I reached out to you and was like, hey, again, one of those connections, one of those people that I met and try to help me grow and improve. And I was picking your brain on how to use StreamYard before we started doing it. Part of that's because I hate social media. I just don't enjoy doing it. I didn't have any type of content, but the thing I'm good at is talking to people, and I really enjoy talking to people. So I was like, all right, screw it. I'll do a podcast where I talk to people that I've met at cons, and that'll have me continue to network when I'm not at cons. And, again, it's just something I do.
It's interesting. I think also this is an area, and I don't know if you saw the Tyler Carpenter interview. The other part that me and Tyler didn't get to speak about is there's 2 types of media that you can have. You can either earn media or you can buy media, whether that's buying a spot on somebody's show, whether that's buying ads on somebody's show, or earning it, or earning a mention, anything of that nature. And I think a lot of people do not understand that in comics, where it's the idea that, look, if I don't have a spot for you and I'm booked, you could buy media, you could buy an ad, you could buy, even if I do have a spot and you're doing 50 shows in a month and you want to be on another 50 shows, maybe you buy an ad on somebody's show, because guess what? You can now be in 2 places at once. And I think this is one of the things that people don't understand, or better yet, if somebody has a comic book and they have half an ad for $150 and they're going to be printing 500 of those books, you can buy a spot for your comic in there. And I think people don't know how to deploy capital appropriately. There is no doubt in my mind that at some point, whether it's for a comic book, for my eBay store, or for something else, or my comic class that God knows when that thing is going to come out, that I might buy ads for it.
Right.
I might buy ads for it because guess what? It might be more effective for me to buy an ad on a podcast than for me to do an interview. Because guess what? Maybe I don't want to be interviewed on this topic. Maybe I don't feel comfortable enough that somebody's going to give me a fair, intelligent, coherent interview on the topic. Because my area is extremely niche, and there's very few people I feel just and this is not even me trying to be egotistical, who can give me a fair interview about comic book investing right now.
Right.
But I can produce the ad myself, and I could get my point across in 30 seconds without having to worry about my host who's supposed to interview me covering it.
Right. Well, and it's interesting you bring that up, because again, it's just how you use your resources, how you use your time, how you use your money, how you use your energy. Like it's you have to be, when you talk about people burning out, I feel like they burn out because they don't protect themselves, they don't protect their time, they don't, use or dictate how they use their resources properly. I think you just have to be tactful with all of that. For me, honestly, I do an every other year strategy with my Comic Cons. So like this year is a very low year for Comic Cons. We're only going to do a handful of Comic Cons. We're only going to do a couple signings. This year is going to be focused more on the creating, mostly writing, producing the different books, going on different podcasts, stuff like that. Next year, we will do more actual physical Comic Cons after more material has been created, and we'll get out there. And again, we'll go make more connections, and we'll do different things. But I just think you have to be very tactful with it. And again, understand what you're trying to do, who your audience is, and what's your goal. I'm not out here. My goal is to not go write, Iron Man one day. Like that's not my goal. I'm not trying to be that guy. I'm not trying to, work my way up to that. If I ever get a book published, absolutely fantastic. If I end up being self-published and going to work in cons and figuring out how to maximize Kickstarter, you go look at some of these Kickstarters, man, and you've got books that are completely independently published, not through a publisher, and they're doing 150 grand. Like, I mean, there's so much opportunity to grow, whether you ever go sign a big deal or not.
I think also, and this is just my opinion, I think a bunch of people, as I stated, there are screenwriters who went to comics, they're producing a comic, they figured out how to get a deal, their book is okay, their book gets signed, and what they really want is they want to go to a Marvel, or they want to get and work their way back into screenwriting, and they want to have a movie published. And it's not so much about money, but I think that they're using comics as a stepping stone to something bigger. I mean, I'll be very honest. I mean, look, I built, a pretty lucrative side hustle on the back of comics. My goal is that I enjoy my business, but my goal is to produce wealth. I have no qualms about that. If I'm to do a comic book, and my goal is to sell that as a TV show or a movie. I have no problem saying that. I'm going to write it so that it's a great comic, but my goal is to prove the concept. It's not to do a comic. It is to prove the concept, because me doing it to prove a concept for 24 grand, funding it by Kickstarter and then selling it to Netflix is the fastest and cheapest way as a business for me to do it.
Sure. And that's completely good. And I think at the end of the day, as long as you understand what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it, then that's fantastic. But I think there's a lot of people out there that have very unrealistic expectations and don't quite understand what's going on. And don't get me wrong, I've been that guy. There's been times where my expectations did not meet they weren't realistic. And it wasn't because, unintentional. It's just I didn't know what I didn't know. And as I learned more, I was able to adjust my expectations and again, figure out a better path of kind of what was more important to me. Again, at one point, if even just 2 years ago, if you had asked me, I would have sat here and told you, like, my goal was to try and get one of my books published. And I'll tell you, after we've gone through multiple deals now where like the publisher's fallen through, or we've had this or we've had that, where it's not even on my radar at this point. If it happens, fantastic.
Also, let me ask you about that. I mean, at the end of the day, I also think that, not to bring up a bad thing, but it's pretty obvious what just came out with Steven Crowder and the Daily Wire. I'm just going to say it. Publishing and going over to a company and them having your book or even having any control is not really all that attractive right now, considering how ugly that has gotten. and how complicated it's gotten. And I understand it's not exactly the same,
Yeah.
but if you have your baby and you're
Right.
making, over 15 grand per book, and I'm not
Right.
saying you are on this, is it really worth it having, a company like Scout, and nothing against Scout, have some control over it? God forbid something goes wrong, or having a company like Second Sight Publishing, because all of a sudden parameters are on it. They might tell you how to do certain things. They might pick the cover stuff. And then all of a sudden you might say, but I'm doing all right without you.
Right.
And are you really, how much money are you going to bring? How much exposure are you going to bring? And is it really worth it for
Yeah.
you to have a little bit, maybe it's another $10,000 in your pocket versus, it's not really
Right.
life changing. And I think that's also what's happening in comics is that,
Mhm.
and I think it's happened in media collectively. I'll be very honest.
Right.
I was offered to join a network with this show. I have no desire to do that because I don't want that network to have any control or any rights or any even a tenth of a right to this show,
Right.
because I think it's worth more, and I don't want control because I want to interview who I want to interview. I want to say what I want to say. I want, when I get sponsors, I want all that to be mine. And I'll be really honest, if I don't feel like doing it for a week and they're expecting me to do it, I don't feel like doing it, right? Like I've had weeks where I'm just like, I want to do one interview. This is one of those weeks where I'm doing one interview this week. I don't want any pressure. So I
Yeah.
think that's a big issue. And nothing against Scout. I'm not saying they're good or bad. I'm just saying that at a certain point, is it really worth the extra, giving up control for these exposure? And I think a lot of people are saying, I'm doing all right. And every time I do a Kickstarter, I'm going by $2,000.
Yeah. Well, so and I'll say this. First off, we love you guys, Scout, Second Sight. You're fantastic. You're both awesome. Um, with both of those particular companies and some of the other companies out there, if you're going to go publish with them, and again, you read your contract, you look and find out what your rights are, and you know your audience. For me in particular, so this is my third story. I've got three more that I'm planning on working on that I've got kind of teed up and ready to go. Yeah, I mean, I think on a certain level, I would be willing to work with one or two, on different stories. I don't think I'd ever go sign all of them. I think what I would do is get one or two for the experience. I would get one or two for, essentially just kind of check that off. And, it is what it is, but there's a certain status thing about it, saying you're published, blah, 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 like whatever. Like it's different. I think on a certain level, in the comic book industry and this and that. Yeah, I mean, because you also too, we talked earlier about, again, evolving and leveling up. You're getting around those different people. So I think sometimes when you sign over and you start working with them, like they do provide a lot of services. I was lucky with Sheldor the Defender because Andrea shared some resources with me, put me in touch, shared with me some artists, shared with me some letters. Shout out to Sergio and Justin, they're awesome. And they did some great things. So I think it's kind of part of it. What services do they provide? So for example, some of the publishers, they're going to help you get, in Barnes and Noble, they're going to get you in Books A Million, whenever your trade paperback comes out. That's something, I wouldn't necessarily be able to do on my own at this moment. Now, don't get me wrong. If I'm able to do it on my own, then yeah, I'm not going to, give up rights and this and that to get somebody else to do it. But if, that's kind of the ticket or, the price to pay the toll at that particular point in my career, then yeah, I mean, I'm going to consider it. Don't get me wrong. Right? I joked around on another podcast the other day. They were like, would you sell out for $250,000? Would you sell out and, let somebody have your title? And I would give up one of my titles in a heartbeat for $250,000. It's done. I'd pay off my house. I'd pay off my forerunner. I'd send my daughter to college. I'd call it shit a day. Like, absolutely.
Yeah. Me and Tyrone from Silver's Comics, where Silver's Reign Comics were speaking about this, and it's this idea that I think it's a real problem because I've heard it on both sides. Where somebody said anybody who says they'll sell their property isn't really a real comic person, but I've also heard it the other way, where I'm saying, wait a second, if somebody's offering me 250 or $500,000, this is real money at this point. I mean, let's look at Joe Rogan. I mean, when somebody says, I'm going to pay you $100 million, for you to go to exclusive to Spotify, This isn't a joke anymore. So somebody is saying, look, I want to buy your comic title for $1 million, and whatever they're going to do with it, so be it.
I'll write something else.
There gets to a point where it's saying there's just a lot of money and there's a lot of things I could do with this money. And while I love my item and my comic, it's $1 million.
Like I'm 37 years old. I have a 4-year-old daughter, almost 4-year-old daughter. I have a wife. I have a house. I have a vehicle. I have a job. And I'll tell you this all right now. If somebody came and paid me $250,000 for one of my titles, like I said, I would pay off that house. I would pay off that vehicle. I would, set some money aside for my daughter. And, maybe I'll try going to doing this thing full time, but it would be something along those lines. But yeah, I mean, again, you're a writer. Why would you not, one of your titles? Now, don't get me wrong. Look, if you got one title and it's your baby and you're working on it and this and that, like, it's cool. Don't get me wrong. I got no judgment. I mean, whatever you want to do, that's your prerogative, that's your perspective, that's your situation. That's cool. This is mine, and Todd will sell out. So all good. Like,
I got no problem admitting. That I'll sell out. Sure. I got no problem admitting. I mean, look, I run an eBay business. I mean, I have assets in my eBay business. There's no doubt about it that if somebody wanted to, and I grew that business to $100,000 in sales, and somebody's like, yo, I want to buy your eBay business and I want to buy all the assets in it, and they were going to give me 2.5 times sales, without a doubt.
What's because
$250,000 is a lot of money. And let's say I couldn't compete for 2 years. So what? I have a day job and I'll do something else.
Right. Who cares? You're done. And I mean, isn't the point you're trying to sell that all anyway? So I mean, what's the difference between me selling it here and selling it there? And again, like everybody gets on their high horse, and it's cool, man. Again, I get it. I understand you're coming from your perspective, and I respect your perspective. I respect, where you're coming at. I do, but again, mine, and I don't really go with the whole if they're willing to sell it, blah blah blah. Like, nah, cool. I mean, again, if you feel that way. I mean, again, I respect you. It's just not how I feel. And, again, at the end of the day, like if I had that opportunity, yeah, go for it. Like, I mean,
there's a concept where some people understand that this is business and some people do not understand that this is business. They understand margins. They understand what sells. They understand how to run a Kickstarter or pick certain covers, and they just have an intuition about it. But they don't understand that if somebody's offering you something for real, it's complicated, and this is a business. I mean, you could say I always wanted to write a comic, but at the end of the day, this is a business. That's what this is, and you have to treat it as such. And it is what it is. And that doesn't mean you can't start another business, and that doesn't mean that there's something else you can't write. That doesn't mean anything. I mean,
it doesn't mean you can't go work on the comics. I mean, think about this. So say you've got multiple stories. I got multiple stories, right? So I've got, you take Project Titans and you take Sheldor the Defender, right? So say somebody comes and they gives me an absorbent amount of money to take on the Project Titans, and I let them take the Project Titans. I take that absorbent amount of money and maybe I turn Sheldor into an animated series. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm still getting residuals on and absorbent amount of money on the Project Titans, but then I get to go, turn Sheldor into an anime and try to take that. So I don't know. Again, everybody to each their own. These are problems I wish to have one day. I hope this is a problem. It would be really freaking cool for this to be a problem. I don't think it ever will be my problem, but hey, man, if it is, absolutely fantastic. I will tell you this. I am content right now rocking out Kickstarters, going and taking care of Comic-Cons, rocking those out and continuing to grow and learn and meet new cool people. And, maybe one day, again, working with different publishers and then going from there. And that's cool. But right now, I will tell you this, I am exactly happy where I am and continuing to grow and move forward.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. And I'm very happy where I'm at. And I've learned a lot of lessons on eBay by being on eBay. I met a lot of cool people. I have a lot of weird connections. I'm like the guy who networked without ever going to a Comic-Con when there's way too many people and has way too much knowledge for whatever reason. Have been to a con in almost 3.5 years. I don't foresee me going to a con probably for another 2, 3, 4 years, to be very honest. I don't find the need.
You don't have to. You don't have to. And you do an amazing job. One of the things I will give you a ton of credit on is booking your guests. You do a fantastic job of booking guests. The just variety you have a really good variety, but at the same time, trying to stay within your niche. And I think that's really cool. Like, I can't tell you how many times, and I message you a lot of times, but I'm like, Dan, how did you get them? Like, that's so cool. Like, there have been so many times where you've gotten somebody that's your guest, and I'm just like, shit, good for him. Like, that is freaking awesome. But at the same time, again, you go from, interviewing, multiple high level voice actors to, legendary wrestlers. And then you're, also getting to, again, come, slum it with us in the indie comic realm. And again, like it's very cool and it's just awesome. So it's something that you do an amazing job of. And, ever since we met and interacted, gosh, probably 2 or 3 years ago now. It's just been very cool, and it's been very cool to watch you grow and see kind of how you do things differently.
It's so weird. It's so weird, just growth. I was editing and I'm cutting up a short, breaking up an interview with Lisa Ortiz, who is Oshawott from Pokemon. In case anybody wants to know that, she also voice directed the Netflix stuff, a bunch of it. So that was a year ago or 2 years ago, and even just the interview style and how I was conducting it to now, 2 years is not a lot of time. And just the trajectory of growth, it's terrifying. I'm like, it's cringy to do that. And then you go back 10 years ago and I'm like, what the fuck was I doing interviewing anybody? And like, you listen to the first one and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. And it was a very prominent person. Then actually, the first four were interesting. So I had no right to the first 50 of my show. I had no right 10 years ago, and even 2 years ago, I wasn't where I was at. But growth is very complicated, and I'm just like, I'm glad I'm republishing all that stuff because it's bad, and it's like if there's one thing that anybody can take a shot at me, it's that early stuff from 2 years ago is perfectly fair game. But it's not even that bad if you go back 10 years ago. And that stuff is out there too, which is crazy. So it's like, I will happily take an L on my interviews from 2 years ago.
They're not even L's. They're just opportunities and they're things that you learned. And again, so what was the one? There was one you did, I guess not super recently, but it was John Swayze. You interviewed John Swayze. And I remember us talking about him, like, again, 2 or 3 years ago, because I had met him at a con. And like, I met him at a con and was just like, yo, he's super cool. Like, you should go interview him. And it was like, again, like a year and a half, like 2 years later. And I saw that you were interviewing him and I texted you or messaged you on Facebook. I'm like, oh, holy crap, you got John. Like, that's absolutely awesome. And I remember watching it, like as I was driving in one morning, and I think it was like the morning after you did it, I was watching it, and like he was just chilling in his chair. And again, like I've met him at one show and interacted with him briefly, but I literally pictured that perfectly. I'm like, yeah, John's just chilling in his chair. Like that's how chill he is. Like he's just chilling and like doesn't view himself as that big of a deal. And I think he's like one of the most awesome voice actors and just great people in general. Like I'm over here fanboying that you interviewed him. Like I just think it's cool as hell.
It was a good interview, and then John Grimlin was great too.
Yeah,
but I digress. Enough about me. I interview a lot of weird people, and it's so weird. Like I legitly have gone from people who are voice actors to LLC to regular wrestlers. Oh, it's great. But again, this is I figured out how to do it. Because all I do is I ask questions, and all I do is just reach out, and I'll give everybody a free piece of advice. If you don't be a dick and you ask enough times, people will say yes. So I tell this story where Eric Scott Kimmer and Dorothy Fawn. So Eric Scott Kimmer is in a bunch of shows, and Dorothy Fawn is Conan from Naruto, and she's Naru from Love Hina. So I reached out to her in 2017. I got no response. I reached out to her last year. I got a response. So what happened?
You put up on Facebook? Like, how do you reach out? Like,
I just find people's emails, Facebook, Instagram. It's not hard.
I know.
I've reached out to people on Tumblr.
Tumblr, damn, that still exists.
And so it's super interesting. So what winds up happening is that's how I got Chris Riley. I want to say he was the head of IDW for a while.
Yeah.
The reason how I got him is I just found him on Tumblr.
but again, that's freaking awesome, and it's cool that like you take your shot. And like you said, if you're not a dick and you ask and ask on occasion, I mean, what was the worst they can say is no.
It's also very helpful because what starts happening is that depending on so I have a relationship with Lingerie Fighting Championship, and then that got me in a relationship with Tommy Bell, and then Tommy Bell got me a bunch of other people, and I already had other relationships, and that's how Bella Madison came about, that's how Bella Rockefeller came about, and eventually I will get Don Cross. And if anybody knows who Don Cross is this very famous photographer who shoots a lot of different women, very interesting individual. And at some point, Tommy will introduce me to Don Cross, and that's going to be a fascinating interview. And again, when I want something for a cover and I want one of these girls, I can get it now. It's not hard to get what I want because I know so many people. And that's what I think people don't understand about networking is that all I have to do is ask.
Yeah.
I have access to so much that it's just one of those things where I should not have the access that I do. And it's crazy, but I digress. It's not about me. But my point is that if you don't be a dick and you ask and you keep on asking and you just keep on going, you will get what you want eventually.
Fair. Good point.
And I think people need to learn how to sell.
People do need to learn how to sell. And that, you know what? Here's the deal. And I'm with you. People need to learn how to sell. But in the meantime, when they don't know how to sell, I know how to sell, and that's okay.
I will add one thing also. So I run an eBay store. I purposely pick merchandise that sells itself. So if you suck at selling, pick merchandise that sells itself.
Yeah.
Because the day you pick merchandise that sells itself, Zenoscope, Merc Magazine, Big Dog Ink to some degree, all this stuff sells itself. And so I, as an individual, know how to find merchandise that sells itself. And perfect example is your book. It's a dog. You know, it's a real advantage, and it's. I like how you're laughing because it's kind of funny. But if you're a dog lover and there's a comic about a dog,
you see it, you buy
it. Exactly, it's an easy sale. So even if you are bad at selling, it's the same thing. If you have a comic about a comedic cat, right, and you have a very playful, cover A, it's probably going to sell itself in a lot of ways. And so you're going to get better at selling because you don't have to put in as much effort because the product is meeting you halfway.
Yes. And then on the other level, it draws in, more traffic than maybe you would have gotten, other ways.
And then the key to that, everybody, and this is free sales advice for anybody who wants it, is you put the thing that is not the cat next to it if you have another title. So you leverage downward or you leverage upward. And people give me shit for this, but that's called upselling.
No. And again, there you go. So I will say this, and I mean, again, it is what it is. Like, this will be my third book. So when I go present, when I go work cons, Sheldor is going to be right there in the middle. Why? Because it's going to draw the most attention. And then I'll have Atlas on one side, I'll have Project Titans on the other, and I'll have a good little bundle deal where you can get all three of them. And we'll have a lot of fun with it. And it'll be, a good seller. And again, we'll we're updating Project Titans, like I talked about. We're updating Atlas too. So Atlas is going to be, a whole different book moving forward. And, that's going to have Randy Santel pushing it. And that's going to be a lot of fun as well. So Sheldor is kind of the relaunch of, the books and kicking things off. And again, that's all ages. We're going to start there. And Project Titans, Atlas is kind of more young adult, and Project Titans is, a little older. So, we'll have a good perspective. We'll have a little bit, something for everybody on the table. And, then we'll start working on the other titles. And I think at the end of the day, as long as you know, again, what you're trying to do, cool. That's good. You go do you go do you. Don't worry about what everybody else is doing. Don't try to keep up. Don't just run your race and just, you focus on yours and you will be all right.
Yeah, I agree. I think too many people look at what other people are doing. And I mean, I'll be very honest. It's hard not to.
It is. It's right in your face.
I know it. You know it. It's hard not to. But then I also look at what I've done. I've looked at what other people do. I'm like, what it is? I'm not homeless. I have a 9-to-5 job. I have a decent business. Would I like it to do more? Yeah. Everybody wants their life better. And anybody who says that they want their life to be shittier is lying. If you would like that, I could perfectly grant it to you in many, many different facets. All you have to do is call me up, guys. I'm more than happy to make your dream come true if that's what you would like. And if I can't do it, Todd will also happily do it for a fee. But anyhow, but I think people just need to just follow the plan, and whatever plan that is. And when your plan is not working, revise your plan.
There you go.
That's all I'm going to say. But I do want to ask you,
change the plan, not the goal, right?
Or just start paddling up heavy upstream against the current, and you'll be fine. If you're coming to a waterfall and you're going to go over, you better start paddling fast and visceral, I might say.
Say Geronimo and go over the waterfall. It's all good, man.
Either way. But I do want to ask you a question before I let you promote yourself, and I'm very curious how you view this, is that where do you think the current state of comics is? And we were touching upon it briefly, but I am curious where you think it's going, because we are in very complicated times at the moment, and I think it's an interesting area of comics. It's an interesting time, and I've heard every answer on this show in the last year.
Well, so I think that question kind of has some depth to it, and it really depends on whether or not you're talking about just kind of traditional comics, the traditional comic format, right? So I mean, like 5 years ago, I mean, Diamond was it, right? Like you had to go through Diamond. That was your only option, and then COVID happened, and Diamond shut down, and then everybody had to figure out kind of different options, and people felt a certain way about Diamond, and then kind of that monopoly got broken. You've got a bunch of, again, kind of smaller publishers out there. Some of them are doing well. Some of them are struggling. Some of them are trying to find their niche. So I think at the end of the day, the opportunity within comics, the opportunity to create comics is easier than ever before. Okay. So it's easier right now to create a comic book than I think it has ever been. But I think that's also kind of part of the problem, is that it's easier to create one. So I think there's a lot out there. I think there's saturation within the market. There's a lot of creators. There's a lot more me's out there, trying to put together a story. And so there's a lot of options. I mean, you go look at a comic book store right now, and I mean, you have issue 1, and issue 1 sells X amount, and then issue 2 is going to take a 50% drop, and then issue 3 is going to take a 50% drop from 2, and then 4 is going to take a 50% drop from 3. And a lot of people are never going to make it to issue 5. And issue 1 only sold as much as it did because at the end of the day, you got a whole bunch of collectors out there hoping that they're going to catch the next issue 1 of Walking Dead and, go from there. So it's just, I would say, I think the industry is just where it's at right now, and it's going to work its way out one way or the other. Marvel and DC still have 91% of, the industry. And then you have Image, and then, you have your Dark Horse and your Mad Caves, and, you have a bunch of people that are trying to kind of be like Image, and that's cool. It's a great format to follow. There's a bunch of small publishers in there, and they're all great. I mean, shout out to them, dude. Like you got out there and you made it. Like, that's freaking cool. If you're a small publisher and you're putting out books right now, man, shout out to you. Like you're making it happen. If you're out there building a comic, again, you're doing exactly what you need to do. You're making it happen. But the industry as a whole, it's hard to make a dime. And if you're coming in there and you're trying to retire on this, I would encourage you to look elsewhere. If some of the best advice I got when I was getting into this industry was very simple. And like, if you can quit now, quit. Like, if you just don't have to do this, if it's not just in your soul, if this isn't something that you just think about all the time, if you're not constantly trying to figure this out, quit. Just quit now. Save yourself money, save yourself time, and quit. If you can't quit, you're on the right path. Like you're going to be okay. You'll be able to get through it, because again, it's going to take you a little bit to make money, even if you're good at sales. Like it's look, when you make money, you're going to reinvest it back into it. It's a business, but just understand that you're most likely playing a long game. If you're not, and your first thing pops, again, kudos to you, but you're the exception to the rule, not the common. So.
Well, I would offer my financial advice, but I charge for that. And
that's fair.
I'm very, very, very good at taking distributions out of businesses. I'm very good at building businesses to a point where they're healthy enough that you can take a distribution out of. It took me 10 years to do that in my eBay business, and I am more than happy. If anybody would like to pick my brain for a small fee, I can definitely provide insight into that. It's so that's something that's out there if anybody's interested. Again, trust me, I will make you, I will put you on the path to become a millionaire a lot faster than people realize. It's not hard. If you live in America, it is the greatest place to do it. It's the easiest. You need a fifth grader's education to become a millionaire in the United States. That is a fact. That's not an opinion. That's a fact. But again, I'm not interested in doing that for free. So, and in a few days, there'll be, a nice interview of me talking about my business and all sorts of fun stuff. So when that comes out, definitely I'll be sharing that out for everybody. But I do want to give you a chance to self-promote yourself. Where could people find you? Where could people support you? Where could people follow you on social media? Obviously, the Kickstarter, where can people find that? I know the link is up in the description above, down below to the side, or wherever it is, but just reminding everybody all that fun stuff, because it is important.
Yeah, of course. So we got Sheldor the Defender on Kickstarter. That's what's out right now. Website is projecttitanscomics.com. That's where you can find the Project Titans, and then all the social media is under @TKellWrites, right by my name there. You can find us on all of the socials, even though I'm not super great at it. You can find us there. And then we recently launched the FEA podcast and started going live. We go live every Sunday night at 8:30 Eastern. We're actually doing an exception on this one. So this past Monday, we didn't want to compete with the Super Bowl. We didn't want to take away any audience from that. So Monday night, we just had an interview with Steve Ekstrom from Sumerian Comics. He's the head editor from them. Super cool guy. Met him at a Comic-Con. And then this upcoming Monday, have an interview with Brandy Berry, who is a writer-director, and she's going to be launching her first comic at Atlanta Comic-Con next weekend. So we're going to be interviewing her. But yeah, you can check us out there. I think that's all of it. I do have a question for you, though. What's going to happen at the Elimination Chamber on Saturday?
Oh, I think that Cody is going to force a chair shot DQ, and I think it's going to be a triple threat at Mania.
Okay, all right. I would enjoy that. I have to admit, I keep reading that they think Jay is gonna swerve everybody and set up the tag title shot, and I really hope it's not the tag title shot. Don't get me wrong, I'll enjoy the match. It's cool, it's whatever. But if that's what they end up building to, it'll kind of feel a little anticlimactic. I would much rather see the triple threat match. So that'd be cool.
I think it's the best option, because I don't think anybody expected the Sammy pop to go the way it went.
Oh my God, that was huge.
And I think it was brilliant. I don't know if you saw the reel on Instagram of the chair shot that Seth hit.
Yeah, I did.
14. Yeah. Then the Roman hit it. I think
he sold it so well.
And then now Sammy did it at Royal Rumble. It's great. It's great.
Really good.
It's so good. And I'm kicking myself for not buying a graded Roman Reigns 9.8 autograph CGC book. Kicking myself for it. It was $58.
Oh, okay, yeah, I get that. That's fine. What is
I'm kicking myself for it, but it's all right. It's all right. I still have my left Blisses. It's all right.
There you go.
But I digress. As far as I'm concerned, and I'm just going to keep saying this, you need to support indie. And what that means is you need to back Kickstarters. You need to follow people on social media. You need to, share it out. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Share goes a long way, guys. It goes a long way, and you don't know who's watching. Believe me when I tell you that somebody got a movie deal because they were on my show and I shared it out and somebody saw it. Makes a big difference.
Yeah. Like, share, subscribe.
Difference. So I recommend that. Also, read comics legally. That's also a big deal. Sounds funny when you say it, but it's a big deal. And then as far as I'm concerned, obviously I support everybody who subscribes to the YouTube channel, likes my Facebook page. It's Pop Anime Comics. Twitter is Pop Anime Comics. Instagram is Pop Anime Comics. I have my account back, everybody. Just want to make that crystal clear. I am beyond happy. I got hacked, and there was like 9 people on it. It was the weirdest thing ever. I don't know any of them, which is even weirder. It would be super weird if I knew all of them. That'd be even crazier. But Facebook is Pop Anime Comics. Obviously, I said the YouTube. It's a big deal when you subscribe. I am at 499 subscribers on YouTube, so I would really appreciate somebody being my 500th subscriber.
I think
It's free, and it makes me feel really special.
I think I've already subscribed. Let me
so,
just
so
check
just
real quick.
keep that in mind, everybody. And obviously, I really do appreciate when people subscribe. And there's an interview for everybody. I think I have 852 videos up there. A lot of cool shorts are up there. A lot of fun content's up there. And it makes a difference. And also next week, I'm going to be doing probably 8 to 10 interviews next week. 8 to 10 interviews across essentially probably 4 days. And you're going to find out why I'm doing that next week. And people in the industry are not going to be very happy with me because I'm going to change the game, and there's going to be no excuse anymore for not showing up on anybody's show, or if you're having a bad day, not to do an interview. I'm just letting everybody know that it's a marathon, and I got a whole bunch of cool people coming on, and you don't know who's coming on next. None of the people have been announced, and we're going to pretty much build out all of them this weekend. So it's going to be crazy. It's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of cool people who I chose to come on. And it's one of those rare times where I'm running a marathon. So this is the time to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you want to watch 8 to 10 of them. That's all I'm going to say, and much appreciated. And obviously, that's all I got. So I'm going to give you the final word.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. Just excited to be here. Go check out Sheldor. Somebody go give him the 500th subscriber. I am already subscribed, or I would be doing it right now. I might try to grab my wife's phone whenever I go back to the bedroom and see, and maybe I'll try and subscribe there. So we're going to get you to 500, okay? We got you. So
it'll eventually come. It'll eventually come. I'm not worried about it too much. I just want it because you need 1,000, and then you need a certain amount of numbers and views and hours watched to get monetization. And we're getting there. We're getting there, which is awesome. But I want to get halfway there before the end of February, which I think is doable. I think it's doable. We've got 13 days, guys. 13 days.
Let's do it.
That's all I'm asking for is one. Just one, guys. Just one.
You're probably going to have another subscriber as soon as we're done. So it's all good. We'll get you there.
That's the point. But enough about that, everybody, because I believe that is a wrap.